The problem started after I had already passed the blue sign for the scale, when I realized there was no line at all, and yet the green light was fixed as if it were waiting just for me. The electronic panel displayed my dot number correctly, but the font looked slightly different from what I've seen for years driving around the Southwest. I slowed down and aligned the truck on the platform, but the radio went silent instantly. No interference, just a completely clean silence. The guardhouse had the state flag, standard paint job, and even the correct coat of arms, but there were no official vehicles parked around it. When the loudspeaker told me to turn off the engine and get out with the documents, I already knew something was out of place. I was driving down I-40 in New Mexico, a long, dry stretch with a constant crosswind that tends to push the trailer a few inches out of the lane if you relax. Dry cargo, palletized automotive parts, standard company seal applied at the yard in Amarillo. Early morning hours shortly after 2 o'clock, when traffic disappears and only spaced-out headlights remain on the horizon. The scale that appeared on the dashboard wasn't unfamiliar to me. I've been through inspections in that condition dozens of times. Even so, the warning light came on too late, almost right on top of the entrance, as if it had been switched on minutes before. The access road was remarkably clear for that time of day, with no trucks waiting to be weighed, and none of the usual coming and going of inspectors with flashlights. The asphalt looked freshly painted at the markings, the white lines still reflecting brightly under my own headlights. There were no displaced cones, nor accumulated trash on the side, something unusual in stations that operate daily. I saw cameras installed on metal poles, but the cables were too visible, running down without any enclosed conduit. When I aligned the rear axle on the platform, I felt that the surface didn't have the same metallic vibration as the fixed axles I'm familiar with. The cabin fell silent after I turned off the engine, a heavy silence without the distant hum of generators that usually power the facilities. The main building had lights on only in the front room, and the side windows were completely dark. I didn't see any state-owned pickup truck parked there, nor any official license plate in the vicinity, just a regular white pickup truck parked behind the guardhouse. The speaker called out my full dot number pronounced correctly, but with an awkward pause in the middle. I mentally noted that detail because nobody usually hesitates when reading data directly from the system. The route that night was simple. Drive to Albuquerque, refuel, and then cross into Arizona before dawn. A tight deadline, but nothing out of the ordinary for that type of cargo. Delivery was scheduled for late afternoon the following day. The company had been strengthening compliance controls in recent weeks, requiring records of all state inspections. Any weighing should generate an automatic digital protocol in the internal system, synchronized by the ELD. My tablet, however, did not display any active inspection notification at that time. The wind began to blow harder against the side of the trailer as I retrieved the documents from the leather briefcase. The state flag was flying, but there was no lighting directed at it, making it almost invisible in the darkness. When I opened the cabin door, I realized the air was completely still, unlike what I had felt seconds before. The white pickup truck behind the guardhouse turned on its headlights for a moment, and then turned them off immediately. That's when I understood that that stop wasn't part of the original route for that night. I got out of the booth holding my briefcase with my documents and my cell phone in my jacket pocket, even though I knew the signal there was usually unreliable. The loudspeaker instructed me to walk to the right side of the building and hand the papers through a small metal window. That was no longer standard because routine inspections normally take place next to the truck, not hidden behind a wall. As I walked, I noticed that there were no visible secondary scales for checking individual axles. The platform where I had stopped seemed too simple, as if it were just freshly molded concrete. The window opened just a few centimeters, enough for a hand to appear wearing a plain black glove, not the light-colored gloves I see inspectors wearing. The voice that came from inside asked for my medical records and proof of workload even before requesting my driver's license. This doesn't follow the normal inspection order, and I've been stopped enough times to know the sequence. I handed over only the driver's license and held the rest firmly in my other hand, waiting for it to be corrected. Inside, there was a silence that was too short to be a system check. I brought with me the ticket from the last official weigh-in in Texas, kept in the same folder. Without being asked, I slid the old paper through the opening along with my driver's license, watching to see if anyone would comment on the difference in condition. The hand pulled everything inside without any questions, nor any visual check right there in front of it. That's when I heard a metallic noise coming from the back of my trailer. Not loud, but distinct from the wind. I turned my body reflexively and realized that the white pickup truck had moved a few meters. I decided to go back to the cabin under the pretext of retrieving another document that didn't exist, just to get a complete overview of the whole thing. As I walked back, I noticed there was no official marking painted on the building indicating the station number or federal code. The sign at the entrance read, "State Inspection," but it lacked the standard reflective sticker from the transportation department. I climbed into the cab and, before closing the door, checked the trailer's seal using the side mirror. It was intact, but there was a shadow positioned directly behind the rear doors. I turned on the dashboard without starting the engine and opened the company's internal application to register a manual inspection. No station appeared to be active at that specific coordinate, even though the GPS indicated that I was stopped at a way station. It was the first time I considered that structure might not be official. The speakerphone called again, now asking me to turn off any electronic devices before proceeding. I kept the engine off but left the dashboard on, because at that point I no longer trusted what was happening there. The loudspeaker called my DOT number again, this time stating that there was an inconsistency in the declared weight of the cargo. This didn't make sense because I had just come from an official weigh-in a few hours earlier in Texas. The voice said that the state system indicated a possible overload on the rear axle, something that my own dashboard did not register. While I was checking the data in the ELD, the screen flickered for a second and lost connection to the company server. At that same instant, I saw in the mirror that the shadow behind the trailer was no longer stationary. The white pickup truck was now positioned diagonally behind the doors, as if preventing the trunk from opening fully. No officer physically approached the truck, even after they alleged a serious weight irregularity. This contradicts standard procedure, because overweight inspections require on-site measurement and a signed report. The side window of the building remained closed, but I noticed movement inside filtering through the light from the front room. The loudspeaker then asked me to await further instructions without leaving the cabin, something that never happens during an actual inspection. My tablet reconnected for a few seconds and displayed an internal company notification warning about an unrecognized station on the route. The displayed coordinates did not exactly match the physical point where I was standing. They were a few meters off. I looked again at the scale's input and noticed that the reflective plate seemed to be held in place with screws that were too recent. The green light on the platform went out on its own, without me having received formal clearance to leave. That's when the white pickup truck started its engine and slowly moved to the left side of my trailer. Before I even decided to leave, the white pickup truck pulled up so close to my rear bumper that it practically blocked any simple reversing maneuver. The loudspeaker announced that, due to the alleged irregularity, my trailer would be subject to an immediate physical inspection. No official documents were returned through the window, nor was there any formal identification of the responsible agent. Through the side mirror, I saw someone discreetly testing the trunk door handle, as if expecting to find the seal compromised. The consequences started there, because if they opened that trailer without proper registration, I would be trapped in the middle of something I couldn't control. I started the engine under the pretext of adjusting its position on the platform, and the vibration of the assembly caused the pickup truck to roll back half a meter. The speaker prompted me to turn it off again, but the voice sounded less steady than before. I engaged first gear slowly, keeping the wheels aligned, as if I were still cooperating with the weighing. The shadow behind the trailer moved away too quickly for someone confident in their own authority. When the interior light of the building suddenly went out, I had already made my decision. I slowly walked to the edge of the platform and, instead of lining up for a new weighing as requested, I turned the steering wheel toward the main exit without waiting for formal clearance. The pickup truck tried to follow the left side, but the access ramp was too narrow for a parallel maneuver. The gate at the exit was raised, unlike the normal procedure which requires authorization to release heavy trucks. When I passed under the last lamppost, I noticed that there was no official sign indicating the station number or the responsible district. In the rearview mirror, I only saw the pickup truck's lights receding, with no real attempt at pursuit. A few kilometers further on, the cell phone signal returned in full force and the company's internal system registered my abrupt relocation. I sent a direct message to compliance describing the location, time, and lack of a digital inspection protocol. The dispatch center responded by asking me to proceed to the next official way station, confirmed by the federal map. When I arrived at the actual station, the agent checked my information and confirmed that there were no active operations at that previous location. It then became clear that I had stopped at a structure set up to appear official, but which was not registered in any state registry. The company opened an internal investigation the very next morning, cross-referencing my account with records from other drivers who had traveled the same route weeks earlier. They discovered that at least 2 trucks had reported similar stops, but did not file a formal complaint for fear of delivery delays. The coordinates always indicated slight variations in position, as if the structure were being disassembled and reassembled a few meters ahead. The legal department advised that any future inspections in that region should be confirmed via the federal system before a complete shutdown. My route to Arizona was permanently altered, detouring several kilometers to avoid that specific point. I continued driving through New Mexico several more times after that, but I never saw that way station again in that area. There has been no official news about an arrest or police operation related to the case. My shipment seal arrived intact at its destination, and the customer was not informed of anything beyond the minimal delay recorded. Even so, whenever I see a lone green light on an empty road, I slow down more than necessary. Because in that early morning, the only truly official thing there was the risk that I had been stopped for too long. If that first story got your attention, leave a like and drop a comment. It tells YouTube to recommend these stories to more people and helps the channel grow. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. The GPS started beeping insistently, recalculating the route as if I had gone the wrong way, even though I was exactly where I should be. The screen showed a mandatory detour to the right, a narrow access road that I didn't remember existing in that part of industrial California. It said there was a heavy roadblock a few kilometers ahead, but the road in front of me was clear, dark, and quiet. The warning light was flashing red, urging me to take the exit immediately to avoid a critical delay in delivery. I had only a few seconds to decide whether to trust that warning or continue straight down the highway, which, until that moment, had never given me any trouble. I was driving through the industrial outskirts of San Bernardino after 11 o'clock at night, carrying sealed appliances with delivery scheduled for a smaller distribution center in Riverside. It was a common route for me, nothing too remote, but it wasn't a well-lit residential area either, just closed warehouses and empty yards. The main highway was flowing smoothly, with few trucks around and virtually no passenger cars. The wind was blowing from the side typical of that region, kicking up fine dust on the edges of the runway. Nothing indicated a real roadblock ahead, no emergency lights, no blue glow on the horizon. The company's navigation system runs integrated with ELD, and rarely miscalculates traffic because it uses real-time data. When he suggested a mandatory detour due to severe congestion, I thought it was strange, but not impossible. I've seen accidents that suddenly close lanes in that area, especially involving smaller trucks. The problem is that the enlarged map showed the highway empty, and the blockade marked a few kilometers ahead, without any additional details. There was no state incident report associated with the alert. The indicated exit was not numbered like the main ones. It seemed more like a service access to the internal industrial area. The street name displayed on the sign was too generic, something like Industrial Access Road 7. I didn't remember ever having used that road before, and I've been driving that way long enough to recognize at least the main signs. I looked to the right and saw only a low pole with a small reflective sign, almost hidden by the shadow. If I hadn't been paying attention to the GPS, I would have driven right past it without noticing that entrance. The company has been tightening its punctuality policy, and delays exceeding 1 hour automatically generate a justification report. I had already faced a problem recently with a missed delivery window due to unexpected traffic. The system message reinforced that ignoring the detour could result in significant delays. The alert was flashing with high priority, something that normally only appears in case of a confirmed blockage. Still, the road ahead of me remained clear, too quiet to justify any urgency. I slowed down slightly as I approached the exit, just to buy myself time to think. In the side mirror, there were no vehicles pressing against me from behind. No one waiting for my decision. The exit sign reflected for a second under my high beam and then disappeared into the side darkness. The GPS repeated the warning with an automated voice that was higher pitched than normal, and it was there that I had to choose between trusting the system or trusting the road I was seeing with my own eyes. I signaled to the right at the last second and entered the narrow access road more out of risk calculation than confidence. If the block were real and I ignored it, I would miss the delivery window and have to give a formal explanation the following day. The ramp descended slightly before leveling off onto a 2-lane roadway with no visible center line. As soon as I completed the turn, the GPS confirmed that I was on the correct alternate route. Even so, the screen took a few seconds to update the detailed map of that area. The surrounding warehouses looked old, with closed metal doors and no exterior lighting on. There was no active guard post or forklift movement, which was unusual even for that time of day. The asphalt was uneven, with sections that had been recently patched, but without any maintenance signs. My cell phone signal dropped to 1 bar as soon as I moved 100 meters into the road. The GPS was still working, but the real-time traffic indicator disappeared. The object that started to bother me was the tablet holder itself, fixed to the dashboard. It vibrated twice as if it had received a silent update, even without a visible notification. I opened the route menu and noticed that the main road, the one I was coming from, was no longer highlighted as a viable alternative. It was as if the system had erased the option to go back. This has never happened to me before, not even in an area without coverage. I decided to slow down even further, maintaining 30 miles per hour, analyzing each side entrance. I passed through an open gate on the left that wasn't shown on the enlarged map. No company identification on the facade, only a partially faded number painted on the wall. That's when I noticed a vehicle parked without headlights, set back between 2 warehouses. I couldn't see the model or the exact color, just the silhouette standing there. I thought about stopping and restarting the system right there, but that stretch of road didn't seem like a safe place to immobilize a heavy vehicle. I continued driving forward, expecting the route to reconnect with the main avenue in a few minutes. The GPS indicated another 800 meters to return to the main road. The problem is that the street started to narrow instead of widening, and the map showed an intersection that simply didn't exist in front of me. The street ended in a wide, cracked concrete courtyard, surrounded by low sheds and walls that were too high for a common operational area. The GPS insisted I continue straight ahead for another 300 meters, even though there was no visible exit. In the right corner of the yard, there were 2 semi-trucks parked side by side, both without tractor units attached. No sign indicated that a business was operating there, only faded numbers on the metal doors. The map on the panel showed a continuation of the road, where there was only a brick wall. I tried to put it in reverse to exit the same way, but the GPS recalculated again and indicated a non-existent side access road. The cell phone signal dropped completely, leaving only the internal system operating offline. At that moment, the vehicle I had seen earlier appeared through the entrance I had used, partially blocking the exit. The headlights were too bright, blinding my side mirrors. There was no honking or gesture, just a standing presence there. I looked to my left and noticed another metal gate beginning to close slowly, powered by an old electric motor. I didn't see anyone operating it, just the dry sound of the gears turning. The GPS kept repeating that I was on the correct route, and that the estimated time had been reduced. This completely contradicted the scene before me. I was stuck in a dead-end parking lot, and the system was saying I was saving minutes. I decided to keep the engine running and align the truck so that the trailer would be protected by the tractor unit itself. If someone tried to open the rear doors, I would have a clear view through the auxiliary mirror. The vehicle at the entrance moved forward a few meters, further reducing the space for maneuvering. No sirens, no official identification, nothing to suggest a legitimate operation. It felt like I had been directed there with too much precision to be a coincidence. That's when the GPS turned off for 2 seconds and restarted on its own, displaying a software update screen. I hadn't authorized any updates that night. When the system came back online, the original route reappeared, indicating that I was 400 meters off the recommended path. The traffic blockage has completely disappeared from the map, and the only way out remained the same access road, now partially blocked by the stopped vehicle. Before I could decide anything, the patio light suddenly switched on, reflecting brightly off the concrete and the sides of my trailer. The vehicle at the entrance moved forward a few more meters, reducing the exit space to something too tight for a smooth maneuver. There was no direct approach, but I felt the time being compressed, as if they expected me to turn off the engine on my own. The GPS remained stable this time, showing the normal route and no active alternative route for that detour. The consequences started there, because I already knew that any delay or damage at that point would fall directly on me. I carefully engaged reverse gear, forcing the assembly to align at the smallest possible angle without touching the side wall. The vehicle blocking the entrance hesitated for a second when it realized I wasn't going to turn off the engine. I took advantage of the minimal space that remained and moved confidently towards the exit, even at the risk of scraping the bumper. The side gate finished closing behind me, completely isolating the patio. When I returned to the main highway, the GPS indicated a normal route as if nothing had happened. As soon as I got back to the main highway, the cell phone signal reappeared as if it had never failed. The company system registered a sudden change in the route and generated an automatic alert of unauthorized deviation. I sent an immediate report explaining a possible navigation failure or external interference with the GPS. The technology department responded hours later, reporting that there were no registered blockages in that area that night. There was also no official update sent to my device at that specific time. The following day, the technical inspection found unidentified remote access to the truck's navigation module. Nothing was deleted, but there was a clear attempt at manual route redirection in real time. The company classified the attack as potentially targeting cargo vehicles in that industrial area. My delay was minor, but the operational cost included a full system audit and a review of the contract with the telemetry provider. Part of the loss was shared responsibility, reducing my bonus for that month. After that, the company changed its protocol for any detours suggested by congestion off the main highway in that region. We are now required to confirm blocking via an external channel before entering unnumbered industrial access. Other drivers reported similar alerts in the following weeks, always near areas with abandoned yards. No thefts were officially reported, but the pattern became too clear to be an isolated incident. My name was included in the report as the first formally documented case on that route. I still pass through San Bernardino frequently, but I ignore any detours that aren't accompanied by state confirmation. The GPS still recalculates sometimes, but it no longer beeps with that artificial urgency. That industrial yard never appeared on the map again, as if it had been removed from the database. The financial loss was small compared to what could have happened inside. And since that night, I never take an unnumbered exit just because an algorithm decided to insist. I only stopped at the Alabama rest stop to stretch my legs and check the paperwork before continuing my trip. The shipment was sealed, everything was up to standard, but when I scanned the QR code on the side label, the system beeped differently than usual. It didn't return a common read error. It returned code that had already been used in another delivery. I looked at the label again. It seemed perfect, aligned, stuck on just like it always comes from the distribution center. It was there, standing under that bright white light, too bright for almost midnight, that I felt something was wrong, something I didn't yet understand. I had left Birmingham late in the afternoon with a partial load, mixed pallets destined for 2 smaller centers in northern Alabama. Nothing sensitive, nothing refrigerated, just regular retail merchandise with digital documentation linked by individual QR codes. The company had been strengthening traceability after some internal inventory problems months ago. Each pallet had a unique label linked to the central system, and any discrepancy triggered an automatic alert. Until that night, it was just another boring conference procedure. The rest stop where I stopped wasn't too isolated, but it wasn't crowded either. A few scattered trucks, a bright white light illuminating the parking lot, and a few people walking among the vehicles. I usually use these stops to review documentation before entering urban areas the next day. I grabbed the portable scanner from the cabin and went down just to confirm that all the codes were readable. That's when the first beep sounded different from the usual pattern. The display showed a short message saying duplicate record detected. This usually means that the code has already been scanned and delivered elsewhere. I looked around thinking I might have read the wrong label on another truck nearby, but the cargo number matched exactly with my digital manifest. I ran the scanner again, and the same message appeared. The trailer seal was intact, uncut, with no signs of replacement. The back doors were exactly as I had closed them hours before. No torn tape, no loose hinges, nothing apparently out of place. Even so, the system indicated that identification had already been used before. I started to feel that kind of worry that doesn't show on my face but weighs on my mind. I opened the company's app on my phone to check the code history. The system showed a delivery record at a warehouse almost 100 miles away, a time incompatible with my route. That didn't make physical sense because I was carrying the load the whole time. No long stops beyond the mandatory ones, no suspicious parking lots along the way. It was there that I realized the problem wasn't a simple reading error. I went back to the booth and got the printed copy of the manifest, comparing it number by number with what appeared on the app. Everything matched up on paper, including departure time and batch code. I went back down and scanned another pallet to see if the error repeated itself. The second code was read normally without any alerts. The problem seemed isolated to that single QR code. The label was stuck on at exactly the same height as the others, almost too aligned. The edge had a clean cut, with no air bubbles underneath, as if it had been applied with professional care. I ran my finger over it, trying to feel the difference in thickness, but it seemed the same as the others. The only thing I noticed was that the paper's sheen reflected slightly differently under the white light of the lamppost. The difference is too small to notice without looking for it. I decided to photograph the label with my cell phone and enlarge the image. That's when I realized that the QR microsquares had a slight variation in density in one corner. Nothing drastic, but different from the other pallets I compared them to right there. If someone duplicated that code, they did so with a good printer and materials similar to the original. That wasn't a makeshift repair. I sent a direct message to the quality control department, informing them of a possible discrepancy in the tracking label. The response asked me not to open the trailer and to await further instructions before taking any action. They requested that I send the exact coordinates and time of the reading. As I was typing, I noticed 2 rest stop employees discreetly glancing in the direction of my trailer. It didn't seem like ordinary curiosity. It seemed like recognition. It was at this moment that the app updated automatically and displayed an internal alert regarding a cargo investigation. The duplicate code was linked to an open case against the company itself. There was no direct mention of me, but my vehicle already appeared associated with the registration. I was stopped in a public parking lot with a load that, according to the system, appeared to have already been delivered elsewhere. And it started to look less like a technical error and more like something that had been planted. The control department asked me to remain stationary until further instructions, but also informed me that the legal department had been contacted. This is not standard procedure for a simple etiquette lapse, and I knew that. While waiting, the app displayed an update saying that the warehouse that supposedly received that code had confirmed the physical delivery of the pallet. In other words, the system had 2 versions of the same payload at the same time. One of them was with me. I started mentally reviewing each stop from Birmingham onwards. Quick refueling, a short stop for coffee, no doors to open. There was no road inspection, no police intervention, nothing out of the ordinary. Even so, someone had managed to link that code to another physical location. This required internal access or label replacement at some earlier point. I looked again at the row of pallets through the inner gap of the trailer, using the small flashlight I carry for inspection. None of them seemed displaced or violated. The vehicle was in exactly the same condition as when it left the distribution center. If there was a change, it happened even before I took over the load. But the system didn't differentiate between them. It only showed my truck as the last one responsible. That's when I received another message saying that the company was being formally questioned about an inventory discrepancy related to that batch. My name appeared as the driver linked to the active registration at the time of the scan. It wasn't a direct accusation, but it wasn't just a technical notification either. The instruction was to proceed to the final destination without opening the trailer under any circumstances. That didn't sound like a simple administrative error. As I was closing the app, a state police car pulled into the parking lot and parked 2 rows behind my truck. There was no immediate approach, only a visible presence there. It may have been a coincidence, but at that moment, it seemed too aligned with what was happening. The QR code remained discreetly pasted there, seemingly perfect. And I was beginning to understand that this could become a bigger problem than just a delivery delay. Even before I started the truck to leave, the app displayed a notification saying that internal auditors were trying to trace the origin of the duplicate code. This meant that the investigation had already gone beyond the operational level and entered the legal sphere. I was still stopped at the rest stop, but the system indicated that something serious had already happened. The cargo inside my trailer was being treated as potential evidence of failure or fraud. The consequences began there. Even before any formal decision of mine, I started the engine and left the parking lot, maintaining a constant speed, without rushing and without stopping again. The app kept sending messages requesting location updates at shorter intervals than normal. It was as if they were monitoring every mile with heightened attention. The seal remained intact, and I checked it in the mirror more times than necessary. I knew that if that pallet was deemed irregular, the entire responsibility could fall on me. About 20 miles later, I received a direct call from the company's legal department, something that had never happened to me before. They asked if I had had exclusive access to the cargo since it was picked up at the distribution center. I replied that yes, and that no doors were opened during the journey. On the other end of the line, there was a silence that was far too short to be reassuring. That's when I realized that the story was no longer just about technical aspects. It was a matter of credibility. When I arrived at the distribution center in northern Alabama, I was directed to a separate loading dock. Unlike the other deliveries that night, there was no queue nor any operator waiting with a clipboard, just 2 supervisors and a security guard. They asked me to remain in the cabin while they checked the seal number before any movement. The code was checked 3 times, photographed and recorded in a separate report from the standard system. Nothing indicated physical abuse, but the atmosphere there was no longer one of ordinary surrender. They opened the trailer in front of me and went straight to the pallet with the mismatched label. They compared the QR code against an internal database using the company's own equipment. Their system confirmed that the code had been scanned days earlier at another warehouse in the same network. At the same time, telemetry data from my truck showed that I had never been to the location indicated by the duplicate record. That was the first thing that cast doubt on my direct involvement. The telemetry provided detailed information on stop times, complete routes, and even engine shutdown times since the initial departure. There was no plausible window of opportunity for physical diversion to the warehouse that was listed in the system. This removed immediate suspicion against me, but it didn't solve the problem. The pallet was isolated for internal investigation, and the delivery of the remaining items occurred with a recorded delay. I signed an additional document acknowledging that the divergent code was identified under my operational responsibility. Days later, the company concluded that the QR code had been tampered with within the internal distribution chain, even before I took over that shipment. Someone had replaced the original label with a duplicate linked to a previously delivered batch, intentionally creating a double record. My truck's telemetry data was used as proof that I was not at the depot mentioned by the system. Even so, my name remained temporarily associated with the report until the formal conclusion of the investigation. This is the kind of thing that doesn't disappear quickly from internal files. The shipment was partially canceled, and the company absorbed financial losses related to the inventory discrepancy. There was no formal accusation against me, but I was required to provide written clarifications and participate in a remote meeting with the auditors. No driver likes to see their phone number linked to a corporate investigation, even when innocent. The altered QR code seemed like too small a detail to cause all that fuss, but it was enough to almost turn a routine delivery into a disciplinary case. Today, whenever I scan a label before leaving with the shipment, I double-check the paper's brightness and the density of the code. It may seem like an exaggeration, but I know what even the smallest detail can cause within an automated system. The seal may be intact, the weight may match, the route may be clear. Even so, a single duplicate code is enough to place the driver at the center of suspicion that didn't originate with him. And trust, when it enters internal reporting, never returns exactly to how it was before. If you made it all the way to the end, subscribe. Most people watching aren't subscribed, and that small click makes a big difference for the channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it,